Welcome, everyone. We've got a series of recordings today about John Stuart Mill. John Stuart Mill is very important for our class. So, I've said in our course there's sort of two major categories of readings that we do. One of the readings that are pretty clearly about personal individual ethics. And they say what is right or wrong for you to do, your own personal behavior. And that's most of our class. A close second, though, are these more social political readings that we're now starting to enter into in our course. Those are questions that revolve more around what should be legal and illegal, what should we as a society value, and often for our course at least it'll center on what does it mean to be an American, what are our values as Americans, and which one of those are good values we should uphold and which ones are a little more suspect. So Mill and another philosopher who we'll read later on, John Locke, they're about as American as apple pie. So we're going to treat them both as social political thinkers. We're going to talk about government and law and society in general. That second category, a group of readings in our ethics course. And they're, like I said, they're both about as American as apple pie. The thing is, they're both British. That's just sort of a funny thing. But, you know, our government was formed as a reaction against the British model. So it's British people in America's early days understood what America was and could be, whether they liked it or not. They understood what America was trying to experiment with. So Mill is writing in the mid-1800s, right? This reading's from 1859. So he's sort of almost commenting upon what America and certain other societies are like. Locke is before them. Locke actually helps inspire the founding fathers. But Mill sort of represents what America is, and Locke helps actually shape what America is through his philosophy. But both of them together give us a real keen idea of what the strengths and limitations of America's sense of government is. Okay, so Mill says, and he's right about it, he says, the point of this essay is to assert one very simple principle. Everything in Mill revolves around or rotates around this one simple principle. It's usually called the harm principle. And it basically says, you can do whatever you want except harm other people. Now remember, this is strictly speaking a principle of government. It's a social political point he's making. So it's a little more detailed. This very simple point immediately gets more complicated. What he means is that you can do whatever you want except harm others. Specifically, the government has to allow you to do whatever you want except harm others. Now, when you harm others or are about to harm others, the government can punish or prevent you from harming other people. So it can try to stop you from harming other people, and it can punish you once if you successfully have harmed others. So the government can punish and prevent you harming someone else. They cannot punish or prevent you for doing things that are immoral, stupid, mean, useless, whatever, unless they also harm others. So you can waste your life. The government can't punish or prevent that. You can be mean to other people, because that's not really harm. The government can't punish you for that. You can do immoral things like cheat on your spouse, lie to people, all sorts of things like that. And the government should not punish or prevent you from doing those. Now, you can harm yourself without government interference. Mill is crystal clear on this. You are not allowed to harm others. You can harm yourself. Right? So for Mill, the emphasis isn't just on, harm in general. It's about harming others. Mill is focused primarily on liberty or freedom. You have the liberty or freedom to harm yourself, because to limit your ability to do that would reduce or limit your freedom. You're not allowed to use your freedom to harm others, and why not? Because harming others actually infringes or limits their freedom or liberty. Okay, so harming yourself, it's not the ideal use of freedom, but it is a use of freedom, right? So the government can't prevent that because their job is to protect and enhance freedom. However, they are allowed to punish or prevent you harming others, because if you harm others, you are messing up their liberty or freedom. The government has to protect their freedom too. So it's sort of weird. You see, freedom cuts both ways. Your freedom allows you to harm yourself, but doesn't allow you to harm others. Okay? So really, what Mill is interested in is not this ethical standpoint of what you can and should do. He's interested in a political point, which is what the government cannot do. He places limitations on the power of government in order to enhance and maintain the freedom of the individual. So government's supposed to be sort of hands-off when it comes to you doing dumb stuff to yourself or you wasting your own life, but they're supposed to be very hands-on when it comes to them protecting other people. So here's one of the cool things about Mill. As we go through Mill, and you've already done the reading, I bet a lot of you liked what Mill had to say. I bet most of you liked most of what he had to say. And if there's something that jumped out at you that you didn't like or you disagreed with or that sounded shocking to you, I'd love it if you shared that with me, because I don't want to assume that everybody loves Mill. Maybe not everyone does. But often my students really like Mill. They say, yeah, he lets the individual do what they want. It's great. He also thinks we should not harm others. That makes sense. Here's the thing about Mill, though, is he's so representative of what America is. People on the left love Mill. People on the right love Mill. Centrists, people in the middle love Mill. He taps in so deeply to what America is that even despite our divisions, Mill seems to have something to say in support of all of us. So just think of any American you know. We all say we love freedom, right? It's just that the people who we generally say, conservatives, Republicans, people on the right, they seem to want, their emphasis is on freedom from. They don't want the government limiting individual liberty. But that's the thing, is nobody wants the government limiting individual liberty, right? So we all agree with conservatives and Republicans on that point, whether we're conservative or Republican or not. On the other hand, people on the left, Democrats, liberals, whatever you want to call them, they're focused a little more on the other side of Mill, which is that the government's job is to prevent and punish harm. So the government isn't totally hands-off. Same thing. Doesn't matter how conservative or on the right you are, nobody wants to see people harmed by others. So Mill's dual emphasis is really, he's got everybody on his side. So that's a point about Mill. His harm principle sort of gets right at the heart of what all Americans basically agree on. Now I want to make a more general point about our class. This is part of what our class is so good for. And it really has to be something like philosophy or history or political science classes that'll help you get at this. America is a really divided place right now. America's always had a bunch of different viewpoints and disagreements, so it's not brand new. But we seem to be pretty sharply disagreeing with each other these days. My claim is twofold. There's two parts to it. One is that even in our disagreements, abortion, gay rights, gun control, the wars that we've been involved in recently, even in our disagreements, there's always something like Mill behind the disagreement that basically is where we do agree. Not in every detail, of course, right? But the basic values of freedom, of liberty, of individual rights, we all agree on that. So what looks like the quote other side is not really an other side. Is that they're emphasizing some part of American values a little more than you do. You still agree with them on those values. We all want prevention of harm to others, and we all want individual freedom. It's a balancing act. And one, quote, side tips the balance a little further one way. The other, quote, side, they're not really opposed sides, that's why I say quote, tips the balance a little bit the other way. But we share basic values in common is what I'm saying, and it's not that you fundamentally disagree with other people, it's that the application or how much liberty versus how much harm prevention, you just disagree on their proportions. So, your neighbor is not an idiot. Your parents, if you disagree politically with them, they're not idiots. They're not evil trying to ruin our country. They just disagree about the application of the same values that most of us agree on. Okay, that's my rosy, hopefully it doesn't sound too rose-colored glasses, but I think it's actually true. Okay, the second point, the twofold, the second part that I want to point out is this. It's easier to find what we agree upon. It's easier to understand the viewpoints of the other side, both the strengths of the other side and their weakness, when you read documents like Mill, like Locke, like other philosophers we've read and will continue to read. Because you see that even if the other side has a bad argument, they have an argument. They have reasons for thinking what they think. And then actually, if you go back to the philosophy or the best stated version of their values, there's usually actually a lot that makes sense in the other side's values. And what I'm saying is one of the great things about our class, I imagine a history class would do similar work, a political science class might do similar work, is that we'll go back to these old documents that you might not read otherwise, that you might actually think are outdated or useless otherwise. And then you'll recognize this isn't useless. This is basically like the Constitution of America. It shapes how we live today. And it's actually something that can unite us and help us figure out where we want to move forward. It's not our distant past. It's actually like a roadmap to our shared future. And philosophy about ethics and philosophy about politics can show you through past documents this roadmap toward a better future for all of us. Right? Because it shows us what we actually have in common, shows us what we agree upon, which makes it easier to solve the disagreements. So, 3 cheers for philosophy. It's really part of the important, it's why this class is actually useful. Okay, so, harm principle. Very simple in the get-go. You can do whatever you want. That's individual liberty or freedom, except harm others. That's when the government comes in and either prevents you or punishes you. And so everybody's liberty is balanced that way. You can harm yourself without government interference. Said otherwise, the government is not allowed to prevent or punish you from harming yourself. Okay. So individual liberty. Very important. But, so the devil's in the details. That simple harm principle is going to allow us to talk about things like marrying multiple people at once, cigarettes being sold to minors, legalizing marijuana, gambling, legalized gambling, etc. It's all about how we apply it in the details. So Mill says individual liberty for all, and we all go, heck yes. And you go, well, what about children? Well, no, not children. Young persons below the age of manhood or womanhood, he says, no, they don't have full access to their freedom. People who are mentally disabled, significantly mentally disabled, people who are in a present state of intoxication, okay, we don't allow them the same kind of liberty as other people. Now, I mean, that makes sense. If you are totally plastered drunk and you say you want to spend all your money on lottery tickets, I as a friend, am not going to let you do that. And I don't know about you, but I'd be fine with the state saying, no, no, no. You're not allowed to do that. That's probably not a good idea. Now, if you're sober and you want to spend all your money on lottery tickets, we still might say it's a bad idea, but I don't think the government should prevent an individual who's sober, who's in her right mind, from spending all her money on lottery tickets. I think she's going to harm herself that way, but at least when she's sober, it's her decision, right? So, what I want to point out here is that Mill says you are allowed to use your freedom however you want. It doesn't have to be smart. It doesn't have to be a good idea. But it still has to really be your decision. And he says people who are significantly mentally impaired, they're insane, they have serious cognitive deficiencies, they're mentally disabled, they're presently intoxicated, right? Or they're a child. All these people in different ways we say that their minds are impaired or they're not in their right minds. So you're allowed to choose freely, Mill says, but it has to be you choosing. And if you're insane or really messed up on drugs or an 8-year-old, there's not a full you there yet. Okay, so that's his claim. So, that sounds good. Of course, the devil's in the details. If someone's 17 and a half years old, do they have no liberty? That would be strange. That would be strange indeed. We also have another question. Let's just get this one out there right away. And I'll ask you in the discussion as well. Why, if 18-year-old is when you're allowed to get liberty, that's more or less when our culture puts it at 18, why can't you drink until 21? Now, I know a number of our students, especially in online classes, are well over 21. Some of you have kids and grandkids and everything. Okay? That's true in every college class, but especially in our online courses. But most college students, even in this class, are still 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, maybe 22. So a lot of them are underage. How do I want to say this delicately? I mean, you're not going to be offended by what I say, but if you're underage, you have something to gain by making an argument for alcohol being legalized for under 21. Okay, so just know in this case, you're probably, if you're under 21, a little biased. Okay? Now that said, I'm over 21. I drink beer, So I wouldn't exactly be biased. I don't have anything to gain or lose by the argument I make, but let's just admit it. I don't like this position of, oh, everyone's biased, so there's no point talking about these things. That would be, to me, that's silly. What I just mean is I'm going to ask you all to do this. Those of you who are under 21, I want to hear your arguments for legalizing, for making it so it's 18 and over for alcohol, or whatever you think. Okay? Just know that I and others are going to come back and, like we've done before with other questions, and sort of ask follow-up questions and go, well, what about this? So, you might think twice about your ideas. I don't mean think twice and not share them. I want you to think twice about this so you put the strongest version of your argument forward. Okay, so think twice about your gut feeling, your initial reaction about the legal age for alcohol, and then maybe you'll change some things. You'll improve it, make it a stronger point. Okay? And I'll be honest with you. I don't 21 seems like an arbitrary made up age to me. I'm not sure what the legal age for alcohol would be, but it does seem a little strange to me that it's at 21. Okay? So here's what Mill would say. There's a short answer and then a long answer. The short answer is, hey, if we put freedom and liberty at 18 for darn near everything, you can definitely drive by then, you can vote by then, you know the list of stuff. You can sign up to die for your country at 18. Then probably alcohol should be part of it too. And remember, to the extent that alcohol is addictive, you might harm yourself by drinking. Mill says, though, you are legally allowed to harm yourself. This is America. If you want to be fat, drunk, and stupid, you have the right to be fat, drunk, and stupid. He's not saying you should or something, like drink your life away, but you have the right to. That's the short answer. Hey, if the alcohol only harms the drinker, you're allowed to harm yourself at 18, just like you're allowed to do anything self-harmful at 18. The longer answer is this, though. And the longer answer gets closer to U.S. policy, although it doesn't exactly justify the 21. So this is what some people say, and it fits with Mill and American policy generally, with a sort of, it's maybe a little too flexible with the logic, though. The point is this, is that young people are not very good at driving cars relative to the rest of the population. Now, Mill says you're also allowed to do things you're not good at. But not being good at driving a car means that people under, say, like 25 are much greater risks in cars. You know how at the assurance agency you can't usually rent a car if you're 25 or under? That's why. They say, we'll take a risk on the average driver, but the under 25 average driver, they say, too unsafe. We're not going to insure them. So you can't rent a car under 25. That's a general rule. Okay, so it's sort of a fact, a widely accepted fact, that people under a certain age, they're not as good at driving yet. Now you add alcohol to that. Okay, we all know how dangerous it is to drink and drive. Imagine if someone statistically is already a less safe driver. Then you add alcohol, which makes everybody a less safe driver. Now you got troubles. Remember, Mill says you can try to prevent people from doing things that are certainly likely to lead to harm to others. Now, drunk driving is clearly a harm to others on the road, not just the driver. So now it makes sense that the government might be able to come in and try to prevent people from driving drunk, and try to prevent people who are especially vulnerable to driving drunk or driving extra badly while drunk. So now it makes a little more sense. But there's a few twists and buts here. Okay, first of all, it's unsafe for anyone to drive drunk. The elderly, baby boomers, me, you, your kid sister. All of us are dangerous to drive drunk. And that's the thing, we already have laws against everybody driving drunk. So whether you're 8, 18, 28, 29, 32, 88, it's illegal and should be to drive drunk because it poses a harm to others. So why add this extra law for some people that says not only can they not drive drunk, but they can't drink at all? What if you don't have a car or a license? You're not going to pose a risk to anybody in a car by drinking. So you see how it sort of fits with Mill to limit the drinking age to 21? But, you know, it goes too far for Mill. So Mill would basically say, we can take into account the increased risk of harm to other people that younger drunk drivers pose. But we already banned drunk driving because it's dangerous no matter who. So why take this extra ban that A, only applies to one group of people, and B, prevents them from drinking at all, which is not itself dangerous to others, but prevents them from drinking at all in order to prevent them from the smaller set of drinking, which is drunk driving. You see what I mean? It'd be like if we ban knives because sometimes knives are used to stab other people. But what about all the non-harmful to other uses of knives? Slicing vegetables, whittling wood, etc. Okay? Mill says you try to limit liberty to the smallest extent possible. If you want to limit drunk driving, eliminating alcohol entirely is going way overboard. Okay, on to page 169B. We got to talk about alcohol right from the get-go. I should have added this a moment ago. It's a slightly different question, but the question of marijuana legalization follows some similar lines, so we'll add that to the question as well. Okay? I'll make sure that they're together in the discussion board, but basically, should the drinking age be 21? Should marijuana be legal or illegal? And remember, again, because drugs are fun and alcohol's fun, and nobody likes their liberty impinged upon, you might be really eager to say, yeah, gimme, gimme. There are good reasons to say they should be legalized or that the age should be changed, but put forward your strongest argument, which may not be the one you had before the reading. It might be the one that you developed through the reading by thinking about these issues. Okay. Now on to 169B. This part's very important. Like a lot of Mill, it's not crazy complicated. It's all about how we apply it, but it's very important. So Mill says there are three primary spheres of liberty. The government's job is to protect the liberty of each person. So these are three areas that basically your freedom or liberty to do as you see fit is almost infinite. Okay, there's always the limitation built in from the beginning that if you use any of these three to harm someone else, you're going to jail. However, you can use any of these three in non-harmful to others ways. Doesn't matter how stupid, useless, spiteful, ignorant they are, you have full right to do so. The first sphere of liberty is the right to consciousness. He says we want to think about this in the most comprehensive or wide, big sense. So it's liberty of thought and feeling. It's also the right to free speech. And it's the right to publish these opinions. So he says it's the right of thought and feeling, 1. It's the right to express these, free speech, 2. And 3, it's the right to publish these opinions. So the first general sphere or area of liberty is the right to consciousness. That first area has multiple parts. Right? So instead of numbering them, I should give them letters to make it more clear. Sphere 1 is consciousness. That includes 1A, thought and feeling. You're allowed to think and feel whatever you want. 1B, it includes the right to express or say what you think. That's free speech. 1C, it also includes the right to publish and print these opinions. Newspapers, websites, etc. Now he says something that I think is interesting here. He says some people, not him, some people want to treat these as different rights and say, well, you can think what you want, but you can't publish any damn thing you feel like. We can limit press in certain instances. And he says, absolutely not. He says if you take away the ability to print what you say, you're limiting the ability to say what you want in fact. If you limit the ability to print what you say, you're actually limiting people's ability to actually express or say what they want. Now, if you limit people's ability to express or say what they want, you're actually impinging on their original right, which is that right of thought and feeling. So the way I like to put it is this. He says, of course you have the right to think what you want. No government can really ever touch that. But if you have the right to think what you want, but you don't have the right to say it in public, your right of free thought is not really worth anything, is it? Same thing. If you have the right to say what you want, you can go to the barber shop or the salon and talk with people about politics, religion, whatever. But if you try to write it down to share that speech with a wider audience and the government arrests you, you don't really have the, you don't have the really have the right to say what you want if you can't say it in print. Same thing. You don't have the real right to think what you want if you can't say it. Okay, so all those three come bundled together, and you know how important that is for Americans. Well, it's important for Mill as well. The second sphere, number 2, it's the right to do what you want. Mill says you can do whatever you want. You want to pierce your nose? Fine. You want to get a face tattoo? Fine. I just read something, another professor here, he has an article, he teaches his class, and it's about tattoos. And the woman who wrote the article said she knows not one but 2 people who have tattooed on their neck where everyone can see it. Mama tried. And that's a reference to a song where the guy says, Mama tried to keep me on the straight and narrow, basically, but I kept getting into trouble, drinking, fighting, robbing. Mama tried, but here I am, a mess up. Right? So you have the right to get tattooed on your neck. Mama tried, if you want, broadcasting in the world that you're a degenerate and that you're a mess up. Okay? That one's simple. That's the right to do what you want. Remember, for all of these, your right to these is nearly infinite, except you can't use any of these liberties to impinge on someone else's liberty. So you can get your own neck tattooed with whatever ridiculous stuff you want, but you can't spray paint graffiti of whatever you want on someone else's car. You can say whatever offensive stuff you want about, say, sex or different religions, all that stuff in public. Free speech, go ahead. But you can't yell fire with your speech in a crowded theater when there's not a fire, because you'll hurt people. You'll hurt their bodies. That's a right. You can't use your speech in that way. Okay, the third sphere is this, is you're allowed to join up into whatever groups you want. Okay, combination among individuals, he says, the freedom to unite for any purpose not involving harm to others. Okay? Now that might seem a little weird, like what is he talking about? You can have a golf club if you want? Well, yes. But importantly here, think about what other, it's not kinds of people. Think about other forms of groups where people combine and unite. These would be religious groups and political groups. So it's not too clear there, but trust me, what he means when he says people have the right to combine and unite is exactly what we mean in the Bill of Rights when we say freedom of association. You can join whatever religious group you want. We cannot ban in America any specific religious group. We also cannot ban any specific religious party. So if you want to be a member of the Communist Party, McCarthy was wrong. You are allowed to be a member of the Communist Party. You can even, Mill says, be a member of a political party that somehow thinks that the United States government should be completely replaced. We should change all the laws, no more presidents, let's turn it into a monarchy. And he'd say, okay, you're not going to get a lot of votes, probably, but you are allowed to be a member of that political party. You're allowed to be a member of a group that calls for the total change of American government. You are even allowed to be a member of the KKK. And Mill says you should have the right to be a member of the KKK. You should have the right to own and wear and display Nazi memorabilia. That would be the second sphere of activity. You should be allowed to think and say and print, say anti-black, anti-Latino, anti-Asian, anti-white, whatever. Propaganda if you want. Remember, we're talking about your legal rights here, not what you should morally do in your free time. But Mill says as soon as with your speech you say all those people should die, that can be illegal, because that could be a form of harm. That could be an incitement to violence, which is illegal. That harms others. You can walk around wearing your Nazi uniform, but you can't have a Nazi World War II era gun out in public, if there's not open carry laws and all that sort of stuff. Okay? You can't just flash a pistol in the theater, right, dressed up in your Nazi uniform. It'll also cause a stampede, just like yelling firewood. And again, you're allowed to say, I'm part of this anarchist movement. I'm part of the, the anarchist movement. I think we should dissolve the government. But you're not allowed to blow up a public building as part of your protest. That's terrorism. Right? So harm against others, always preventable or punishable by the government. Anything that falls short of this level of harm, gotta let it fly. That's America. So Mill is saying this is how it should be, and I bet a lot of you more or less agree. Okay, none of us like hate speech, but most of us think that, yeah, if you want to use racist language, I don't think there should be a law against racist language, right? And especially for less offensive things, like, if you want to drink too much, okay, there shouldn't be a law against drinking too much. Okay? But why? We always in this class, we have to ask why, or else it's useless. If we don't ask why, then we just go, well, John Stuart Mill said this. Somebody else said something different. Okay, like, if you don't ask why, you just have a list of quotes. Who cares? Here's the why, and actually this gets sort of tricky for Mill. This is one of the places where he's a lot like America in practice, but in the sort of theoretical justification, maybe he's similar, maybe he's different. We see this on 170b at the very top. Mill is a utilitarian. So Mill thinks that even if you allow people to harm themselves, okay, that doesn't seem very utilitarian, right? He says you can harm yourself. Nobody should try to stop you. He says, though, that even if you allow people the freedom to harm themselves, yes, they will sometimes harm themselves, but think about the much bigger harm that comes from trying to prevent all self-harm. If the government had the right, which it does not, to prevent or punish all forms of self-harm, it would prevent some forms of self-harm. It would, however, also impinge greatly on everybody's freedom in the process of trying to limit some harm. So this is how Mill says it. He says, humankind are the greater gainers by suffering each other to live as seems good to each, rather than by compelling each to live as seems good to the rest. So his point is this. If you live with your freedom, sometimes you're going to harm yourself. That's a real cost and it's a real problem. A much bigger problem is if we try to prevent every little mess up by other people, because then we're limiting everybody's freedom all the time, and the only benefit is that occasionally self-harm is prevented in a few individuals. So overall, it costs less to let you harm yourself and for all of us to thereby retain our full freedom, our full liberty. So you see, I think practically a lot of us can agree with that. Yeah, it generates more utility overall. Fantastic. But that's not really the way the Bill of Rights is worded, right? I think the spirit behind the founding of America is not quite utilitarian, but really it takes rights more seriously, where even if the right somehow messed up utility, cost more pain than it generated pleasure, right? We'd say, hey, it's a sacred right, it's in the Bill of Rights. Mill, those rights get justification because, and to the extent that, they tend to generate more utility and benefits overall. So the real question here is, do you think that freedom is good because it tends to lead to other good things? That when you're free to choose what kind of job you want, you tend to find yourself in the best job eventually? Or do you think that freedom's good just because you should be free to do whatever kind of work you want, regardless of whether it's good for you or other people to have that freedom? Okay. So what's the real justification behind having freedom? What Mill says is that, like, overall it tends to lead to more good things, or just that, no, freedom's sacred and you have that right to freedom no matter what. And we'll stop this recording here now, and I don't think I worded it too clearly. That is a question to you to think about now that I'll post in the discussion board. If you love liberty and freedom, which I'm guessing a lot of you do you love them because they tend to lead to good things? When we give people freedom, the world benefits because of it? Or do you think that people ought to have their freedom no matter what, even if that freedom in general is bad for them and other people? I know it's a broad question, but I think you all can get the sense of it, right? Like, if it turned out we lower the drinking age, and all of a sudden all these 19-year-olds are getting wasted all the time and dropping out of college and things like that, only directly harming themselves, would you then say, okay, we should go back to the old way, too much self-harm, let's limit freedom again, bad things are happening because of freedom? Or would you say, well, it's a shame they're ruining their lives, but You should have the freedom even if it's self-destructive, okay? Even if it's bad, in general. And with that, we'll end this recording, and we'll move on to some of the other points of Mill. Thank you, everyone.